Hello. So, this video is going to be about the evolution of war, preferably about the 1700s to the 2000s. Each year, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, and 2000s, has at least 3 wars in them, and will be accompanied by a photo. I will describe them in a small sentence. This description will provide you with the weapons and what they used during these wars. The Great Northern War. It was a war started between Sweden and Poland. Using only muskets and cannons, it was started over Swedish King Charles X. Gustav because he wanted to aggrandize more Baltic states. This would be the second war under his rule. The war ended in Swedish defeat because Russia, Denmark, and Austria all declared war on Sweden. Sweden's only ally at the time also switched sides on them, making the war almost impossible to fight. The 7-Year War. The 7 Years' War was between France, Russia, Saxony, Sweden, and Austria against Prussia, Hanover, and Great Britain. Fought using muskets, cannons, wagons, and horses. 2 separate wars took place during this war. The well-known North American War, where Great Britain won, but also in Europe, where Britain also won. The American Revolution. The American Revolutionary War was started between the now-formed United States and the Great Britain-controlled Canada. It was fought using muskets, wagons, and cannons. The war was fought for the independence of the U.S. with the help of Dutch, France, and Spain on the U.S. side. It was effectively a U.S. victory because the U.S. gained independence. The Napoleonic Wars. The Napoleonic Wars were fought with muskets, cannons, and horses. It was started after the French Revolutionary Wars, where Napoleon's accession to leader broke the Treaty of Amiens. France had the upper hand in the first half of the war, but by the end of it, a bunch of European monarchies pushed France back and Napoleon was outcasted. The Crimean War. The Crimean War was fought with muskets, which were breech-loaded, cannons, and horses. It was between Russia, Great Britain, France, and the Ottoman Turkish, with help from Sardinia, Piedmont later. The war arose over Russia's demand over protection in the Orthodox subjects in the Ottoman Sultan. The British won the war with French assistance. This later paved the way for the unification of Italy. The American Civil War. The American Civil War was fought with muskets, which were breech-loaded, cannons, and horses. It was fought between the northern U.S. states and the southern U.S. states. It was fought over the slaves that the South was using to farm their crops, the immense debt the U.S. had at the time, and the cultural differences at the time. The war ended up with the northern states winning. World War I. The First World War was fought with bolt-action rifles, machine guns, light machine guns, submachine guns, shotguns, tanks, and planes. It was fought between the Central Powers and the Allies. It started because of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It was an Allied victory, but it led to the Russian Revolution and World War II. World War II. World War II was fought with automatic rifles, tanks, and planes. It was fought between the Axis and the Allies. It started because Germany's leader, Hitler, wanted Eastern Europe. The Allies won after the failed attack on Russia in the east by the Nazis and the successful D-Day landing by the Allies, making the Germans completely encircled. The Korean War. The war was fought with the old World War II weapons given to the South Koreans, Kalashnikov 47s, and captured World War II German guns in the old USSR weapons, like the PPSH-41 given to the North Koreans. The M1 Garand, the M1A1 carbine, the M1 carbine, the M2 carbine, and the M2A1 carbine used by NATO in tanks, planes, and experimental helicopters. It was fought between North and South Korea with the help of NATO on the South Korean side and financial and weapons support on the side of the North Koreans from the USSR. The war ended with a draw separating each country to this day. The Cold War. The Cold War was fought between Russia and the US. even though no direct conflict between them happened, instead using proxy wars or fighting against smaller countries like Afghanistan for the Russians and Vietnam for the US. Both fights were lost. The US won as the economy and freedoms that were implemented destroyed the USSR. The invasion of Afghanistan. The invasion of Afghanistan was fought with M4 carbines, M16s, M4A1s, M240s, M249s, AK-47s, AKMs, AK-74s, PKMs, Dishkas, IFVs, tanks, helicopters, APCs. The war started when the World Trade Center was hit by 2 planes and the Pentagon was hit with 1. The war ended in an ISIS victory after NATO pulled out, and the ISIS combatants attacked Afghanistan forces, forcing them to surrender and also causing the death of 12 US soldiers during the withdrawal. The invasion of Iraq. The invasion of Iraq was fought with M4 carbines, M16s, M4A1s, M240s, M249s, AK-47s, AKMs, AK-74s, PKMs, Dishkas, IFVs, tanks, helicopters, APCs. It was fought by NATO and Iraq and later insurgents. The war started because the US believed that Iraq had WMDs. The war was won by NATO, and after a few years NATO pulled out, but later returned because of ISIS.